Hey everybody, it's Mike and welcome to Chip Damage. And if you've seen any of my most recent videos, you'll know that I just became the proud owner of a PlayStation 5. And you know what? I like it. It's a pretty cool piece of hardware. But of course, with the release of the PlayStation 5, it kind of heralds the end of the PlayStation 4 and kind of the entire end of the 8th generation of consoles as we move into the 9th. In this time, I was thinking back and going like, man, the PlayStation 4 had some pretty amazing games. Can you believe this thing is almost 8 years old? Yeah, it came out in the end of 2013. And in those 8 years, it had so many amazing games. It had amazing sequels. It had amazing new IPs. It had amazing remasters. It had amazing indies. It really fired on all cylinders for most of those 8 years and kind of rebounded after the somewhat disappointing PS3. And in this time, it got me thinking, I want to talk about my favorite PlayStation 4 games, particularly my top 10 PS4 games. I'm going to share those with you here today. And I want to hear what your favorites are if you don't see any of your favorites here, and if you want to comment on some of mine. Now, of course, this was a very difficult list to make. There are so many amazing games on PS4, this was very hard to narrow down. So I used 3 prerequisites to kind of help me along this process because, like I said, it wasn't easy. Number 1, I tried to get games that were complete, that didn't have DLC still ongoing or games that weren't like 100% done and set in stone because that can kind of change your opinion of what a game could be. Number 2 is that not all of these games are necessarily first-party Sony games or PlayStation 4 exclusives. The reason I did that is because I felt as if you excluded third-party games from a list like this, you'd have to exclude them from PC list and Xbox list. You'd have to do like top 10 third-party games, and that just feels like it's doing those games a disservice. I played them on PlayStation 4, and I really enjoyed them. Now, that being said, many of these games do have somewhat of a PlayStation or Sony association, but I just needed to mark out that not all of these are 100% exclusive. And number 3, I picked the games that I just enjoyed the most. Maybe not the highest scoring, most technically proficient, or the tightest gameplay, just the games that elicited the biggest response from me, whether it be laughing, crying, fun, whatever. Just the games that I felt the most of, that pulled on my heart the most while I was playing them. So without any further ado, let's get into the list. And if you like what you're about to see, please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos. But let's start with number 10. And this is a game that many people who own a PlayStation 4 really love. It's no surprise. And that is Marvel's Spider-Man. Yes. So, of course, this is one of the biggest games on the PlayStation 4, and I was immediately drawn to it. I'm a huge Marvel fan. I'm a huge superhero fan ever since I was a little kid. And you know what? For the most part, I enjoyed Spider-Man games. You know, from the Amazing Spider-Man on the PS1 and Dreamcast, the silly Web of Shadows on the Xbox 360, the movie games on the Xbox and PS2, they were all pretty good. So when I saw that Sony was making a first-party effort with Spider-Man using Insomniac and creating their own universe, I was interested. I originally played the demo for this in E3 2018, and I thought it controlled it fantastically, so I was pretty excited when it finally came out. What I did not expect was for how much I would love this game. Like many have said, just the feeling of swinging around as Peter Parker is fantastic. The combat, while it starts kind of shallow, ends up being a lot of fun with a ton of different options. I love the interpretation of the characters, the villains. They kind of have like a 60s vibe mixed with a modern vibe. They didn't go with an entirely like new age vibe. They kind of went somewhere in the middle. Like, you know, you still have your corny villains from the 60s like Scorpion and Rhino, but they've been given updates without losing who the characters originally were. Loved it. Fantastic. I unlocked every costume in this game. That was one of my favorite things to do in it. Can't wait for part 2, and I loved Miles Morales. But why is this number 10? Well, I didn't place it any higher on the list because though the gameplay and the characters are fantastic, I didn't care for the story that much. It didn't resonate with me. It didn't like draw a tear from my eye. There's some highlight moments, but minor story spoilers right here. Mr. Negative was an odd character to focus on in this game as a villain. I didn't really fear him at all. I wasn't really interested in him. I think they dragged out Dr. Octopus's reveal a bit too long, like Audio Octavius turning into Doc Ock. I felt that took like just a little too long. So the story wasn't like Oscar worthy to me, but I still really enjoyed it and I love this game, and it's my number 10 favorite PS4 game. All right, moving on. We're talking about the only indie game on this list. Just to start, I love indie games. I think they're some of the best games being made, but one type of indie game that I usually don't care for are the type that try to, you know, tug on your heartstrings or be abstract. Like, you know, I think Braid and Limbo and The Witness are all fine games, but like when they try to like tug at you or teach you a lesson. I don't really feel anything. I'm not saying that they're not good at what they do, but they usually don't resonate with me on anything deeper than a pure gameplay level. But that wasn't the case with this game. What we're talking about right now is What Remains of Edith Finch. my favorite indie on the PS4. So what is this game? If you don't know, this is what many people would call a walking simulator. It is a first-person game where you play as a young girl, Edith Finch, whose family has mysteriously passed away over the years, and she's going back to the family home to kind of investigate and look through the house. And that's kind of it. You just play as Edith, reliving family stories as she goes through their crazy, wacky house. And each one of those memories kind of plays like a different type of game for a quick moment. And while there isn't a ton of gameplay in this game, this is a purely story experience. The way it was told just really hit me. You could beat this game in like 2.5 hours. However, in those 2.5 hours, as corny as it sounds, I really did feel like I went on a journey and got to know this family. This was told with a heart that just resonated with me. The clutter of the house itself, like the way it was put together, it felt like a real place that was lived in by a very loving but very wacky family. The story stuck with me. I really suggest that you play this. I know that it's not much on the gameplay part of the game. It's not, doesn't have combat, it doesn't have puzzles to solve, but it is a piece of art that was made in the gaming media that I think deserves your attention, and it really stuck with me. That is What Remains of Edith Finch. Please check it out. It's not just on PS4, it's on many consoles, but I played it on PS4 and loved it there, and that's why it's my number 9 title. All right, moving on to number 8, we're looking at a remaster. Yes, I don't think it's cheating putting a remaster of an older game on this list, because this game was remade with such beauty that I believe that it deserves to be on this list, and I could not believe that this was getting such loving treatment from Sony, and that is Shadow of the Colossus Remastered. Yes, this game, one of my favorite PS2 games. It is not hard to find Shadow of the Colossus fans. If you've played this game, you know that this was one of the PS2's greatest. I believe it became one of the PS4's greatest. Blue Point Games, who's well known for remaking classic games like Metal Gear and Gravity Rush, got their hands on Shadow of the Colossus and delivered an amazing effort. While this game was already remastered on the PS3, this was more of a ground up, or at least from the skeleton of the former game, kind of almost remake. This game looked so good. It really captured the feeling of that PS2 game. The scale, if you don't know, which I'd be surprised if you don't, you play as a young boy named Wander who must revive his dead love by slaying 16 enormous beasts who kind of, the combat with which kind of borders between actual combat and puzzle solving, because how do you kill these things that are building sized? And just the layer of paint, the coating of paint they put on this game from the old one just makes it the better version. It controls a little better. It runs a little smoother. It really kind of allows the vision of the original to be portrayed in a better way on the PS4. I loved it. I'd beaten this game 6 times on the PS2, but I went through it another 3 or 4 times on the PS4 because of what a good job they did. They added some Easter eggs. They added some unlockables. I loved it. Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4. If you've never played this game, what's wrong with you? Please play this game. And if you've only played the PS2 version, this is not the exact same game, and you will not believe how beautiful it is today on the PS4. Check it out, Shadow of the Colossus. That is number 8. Okay. Number 7 is kind of a 2-in-1 and somewhat of a controversial pick, but please don't leave the video if you don't like what I'm about to say about this game. Just wait till I'm done talking about it. And that game is Metal Gear Solid 5. Yes, and this is kind of a twofer for those of you who don't know. Metal Gear Solid 5 was kind of split into 2 separate releases. There was the first half, Ground Zeroes, and there was the main part of the game that is the Phantom Pain. Now, this game had a tumultuous development. It is well known in the gaming sphere that the director of this game, Hideo Kojima, left the development partway through this game, was not able to finish it. There was a lot of problems developing it. There was a lot of problems with the producer Konami, and that obviously affected the game. This game's story is not complete, or at least it's not in the form that the creator originally intentioned. But what we did get was one of the best playing games of all time in terms of sheer gameplay and sheer ingenuity, fun, and stuff to do. Metal Gear Solid 5 killed it. Was its story as strong as its predecessors? Absolutely not, because it wasn't finished. It didn't have the kind of conclusion, the resounding impact that the former Metal Gears had in the story department. But when it came to the gameplay, it was a whole new world. Taking what they learned from Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Kojima kind of expanded on the base building element of this game, where you kind of have your own offshore base that you fill with soldiers, supplies, and vehicles, and you take them on missions. Everything's kind of like set up in bite-sized missions where you take gear and helpers with you. and it's just so smooth. The action to stealth gameplay is just seamless. The combat, the amount of things you can do, the vehicles, the helpers. You can bring a horse, a dog, a helper sniper in this game to help you do missions. You can replay them for better ranks, and it's so quick. Like, you just gear up, you go in, you capture guys by putting parachutes on their belt and sucking them back to your base. There was so much to do in this game. I put hundreds of hours into it after I beat the main story, which, like I said, was disappointing, and why this game isn't higher up on the list. But if this game was completed, it may have been one of the best games of all time. But as it stands, it's just one of my favorite PlayStation 4 games of all time. Yes, it was released on other consoles, but Metal Gear has a strong Sony PlayStation kind of association, so I decided to put it on this list. I do suggest that you play this game. If you were hesitant, you can now buy these together in the Metal Gear Solid 5 Definitive Edition, so you get the whole experience. It's a hell of a game. It's very addicting. It's a lot of fun. Maybe it wasn't the best way for the series to end. I still think Metal Gear Solid 4 was the perfect story conclusion, but you can't deny this game was one of the best playing games of the last generation. Metal Gear Solid 5, Phantom Pain, Ground Zeroes. You put them together, you got the Definitive Edition. And moving on, we are now looking at my number 6 game, and we're not going too far away from my number 7 because this game is also made by Hideo Kojima, and this is another controversial pick, and that is Death Stranding. Yes, Death Stranding is one of my favorite PlayStation 4 games of all time. And why is that contentious? Well, if you played this, you will know. Some people find this game very boring, that it is a delivery simulator, because there's no quick way to kind of surmise the story of Death Stranding, but what you actually do for the most part is bring packages from one person to another in a desolated world that is very dangerous, that is very hostile, covered with ghost monsters and raiders and rain that speeds up time. But there was something about this game. There was that Kojima attention to detail where, yes, perhaps the game was too bloated, too ambitious, but there was a magic to it in what I could best call the multiplayer. So in this game, as you're traversing, you leave things behind. You leave ladders and ropes as you traverse the very difficult terrain. You leave signs. You can leave vehicles. And when you leave things behind, they can appear in another player's world. And while that doesn't sound too fantastic, it did have a bit of magic to it. As someone who mostly enjoys single-player games, other than my fighting games, which I love playing online, this was my favorite type of multiplayer. There were moments where I'd be in a difficult spot trying to climb a mountain, and it's 1 a.m. in the morning, and I just see someone has left a rope in the perfect spot for me to climb with a little sign next to it that says, "Go up here." And I felt like an odd connection, and I think that was the vibe that Kojima wanted. Just the idea that you would be helped and you'd want to help others. And that was maybe a pretentious ambition, but it worked for me. After stuff like that happened, I started leaving things behind to help other players that I would never see in game, never talk to. But it's like, you know what? I'll leave this ladder here. I'll help build this road because someone else may need it. There was a part where, like I said, this game is very desolate. I stepped out of a building, but there was a fully constructed road in front of me, which could have only been through the collaboration of many players helping build a road for other players they would never meet. And I'm just like, that's the sense of community that I love. Just good Samaritans leaving stuff behind, not because they wanted to help their own game, but because they wanted to help other people. And it just resonated with me. There was a great magic to the single player, or to the regular part of the game as well. There was just something about climbing over mountains, quietly listening to the haunting soundtrack late at night, finding scraps left behind other players that just really stuck with me. I really enjoyed this game. I think the boss fights were fantastic. If you were hesitating playing this game because you heard it's a slog, give it a shot. Hopefully it resonates with you as it did with me. And if you've started this game and it just didn't click with you, and you put it down, I suggest you give it another shot. Give it some more time. This game really gets going a few hours in. I loved it. Death Stranding, that's my number 6 favorite PlayStation 4 game. Let me know what you guys think of this. I don't know too many other people who actually played this game, so I want to know, did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you finish it? Let me know. Okay, moving on to number 5 is a game that is probably the game I've replayed the most on the PlayStation 4, and if you've seen my channel, you know I'm a fan of this game, and that is Resident Evil 7. Yes, Resident Evil 7. While not a PlayStation exclusive, Resident Evil is yet again another franchise closely associated with the PlayStation since its inception, and I love this game. So, if you don't know, 2012, Resident Evil 6 comes out. I'm super hyped. I buy it. I never finished it because you know what? It had so much action, it was boring. It didn't feel like Resident Evil. It felt like some other type of game. And while it played fine, and I'm sure if I go back and revisit it, I'll find something more to like, it just felt like it nearly killed the vibe of the series. It sold very well, but like kind of the soul felt gone. I enjoyed Resident Evil 5 for as actiony as it was, but it still had like that Resident Evil feel. 6 did not, and I thought the franchise was in trouble. It was a couple of years since we had seen a main release of Resident Evil. It was between 2012 to 2017, 5 years with no numbered release. So when Resident Evil 7 was first announced in the amazing E3 2018 press conference, and they played that incredible trailer, I was super hyped. I didn't know what the game was about. It had Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes, which was very unlike Resident Evil, but it turned out to be incredible. I was hesitant when I bought the game. I'm like, man, please let this be good. And it wasn't good. It was great. It was creepy. It was claustrophobic. Everything felt rotted and tetanusy and scary again without sacrificing the gameplay. Yeah, it was first person, which would normally lead it to be maybe more action focused, but no, it was a perfect blend between some action, some puzzle solving, and a lot of scares. Just a great vibe. Like there was a lot of love poured into this, and it revived the series in a big way, because since then there has been a yearly release of a big Resident Evil game, whether it be Resident Evil 8 or the remakes of 2 and 3, and they've all been great. This is what re-geared, re-gassed up the Resident Evil franchise. That's Resident Evil 7. I love this game. If you haven't played it, please check it out. Resident Evil 7 is my number 5 favorite PlayStation 4 game of all time. All right, moving on. We are now looking at, Resident Evil 5 was my number 5. My number 4 favorite PlayStation 4 title is Sonic Mania. Yes, so if you guys have seen my other videos, you all know I'm a huge Sonic fan. And like many other people, whenever a Sonic game comes out, there's always that hesitancy, like, will it be bad? Will it be good? Because I have a very odd relationship with Sonic. I buy all his games and I enjoy most of them for the most part, no matter what other people say about them. But for my anime fans out there, this is how I kind of think about my platformers. I think Mario is like Goku in the fact that he's always in tip-top shape. He's at 10 all the time. He's at like, from a scale of 1 to 10, always at a 10, always ready, always great. You can expect great things. Sonic is more like Gohan. Sonic it varies between a 1, like being totally helpless and useless, to an 11 on very rare occasions. Like, he can be better than the best for brief periods of time, and you can't tell when it's going to happen, but there's a lot of variation. Well, you know what? Sonic Mania for me was an 11. When I first saw the trailer for this game, that I saw it was traditional sprite-based gameplay with a new coat of paint, I was over the moon. And when it finally released, it lived up. It felt like a classic Sonic game. My favorite type of 2D platformers were Sonic games because of the physics, that pinball effect, the speed, the kind of precision that you need. I loved it, and that's what Sonic Mania had. Christian Whitehead and the rest of the guys over at the rest of his studio really nailed the vibe of Sonic. They remade a bunch of classic Sonic stages with new twists on them, at the same time making their own original stages that were really amazing. Eventually, there was an expansion for this game called Sonic Mania Plus that added more playable characters. So you have a total of 5 characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Mighty, and Ray. They're all unique. They all have their own special abilities, and they're all really fun to replay the campaign through. And there were great unlockables in this game. There was great bonus stages. I really didn't have any complaints with this game other than why did they add Oil Ocean from Sonic 2 in this game. I hate that stage. I don't think anyone likes Oil Ocean. Let me know if you're an Oil Ocean fan in the comments, and let me know what you like about Oil Ocean. That's the only low point of this game and why it's number 4. But yeah, Sonic Mania, my favorite platformer on the PlayStation 4 of the 8th generation of consoles. This is available on just about everything, so if you haven't played it, please check it out. But I played it mostly on PlayStation, how to get every unlockable. Let me know what you think of this game, and let me know what you want from the next Sonic game coming out. Sonic Mania, particularly the Plus version, my number 4 favorite PS4 game. And now we are on to my top 3 PlayStation 4 titles, and as of this recording, these are all PlayStation 4 exclusives. These are games that I put the most amount of time into. These are games that really just hit that perfect balance between gameplay, story, and vibe for me, and I'm super excited to talk about them. And my number 3, and this was almost number 2, was Gravity Rush 2. Yes, now, I love the original Gravity Rush on the Vita, and I, of course, love the remaster on the PS4. And that just didn't seem like a game that was going to get a sequel. So when in 2017 this finally released, yet again, I was over the moon. I can't tell you how much I love the vibe of this game. If you don't know, Gravity Rush is about a young girl named Kat in a fantasy world that's kind of spread out amongst floating islands, and you have the ability to change gravity, fall in the direction you want, which kind of simulates flying. And of course, there's like a plague on the world that you must fight back and a big mystery to kind of unravel. But more than that, what I love about this game is just the style. Not just the cell shading, but like the amount of color this game has. This has personality, original ideas. It was a new IP for this generation that just really was original. And strangely made by the director and team behind the first Silent Hill game. This game just bleeds personality. The protagonist Kat is extremely likable. Her abilities are so much fun in this game. The ability to fly, jump huge distances, control gravity. The combat, while kind of imprecise, kind of exemplifies that fact that Kat is not flying. She is falling with style. She is kind of aiming herself at opponents and kind of hoping to kick them. And I think it can get kind of frantic, but it was a little bit improved over Gravity Rush 1, and the abilities you have are just fantastic. This game has heart, it has style, it has personality, like I said. I can hear the music. Sometimes I just pop in this game and float around the world because there's nothing else like it, as far as I know, on the PlayStation or any other console lately. Sadly, I believe the team that made this game just dissolved, so we'll never get a Gravity Rush 3, so we can only play the first two titles. And sadly, some of the DLC for this game is locked away forever. There's a pre-order bonus for Kat, where she had a white costume that's gone forever. And when the servers went down for this game, some unlockable content also went the way of the dodo, and you can't get it anymore. But I still strongly suggest that if you haven't played this game, please do. It's a memorable experience. It's a visual experience that you're not going to get in any other game. It's just made with a lot of heart, and I can't ramble on enough about this game. Kat is my favorite PlayStation mascot character. I mean, she never achieved the popularity of a character such as Kratos or Crash Bandicoot, but my favorite Sony-owned character is Kat, and that is because of this game. Gravity Rush 2, please check it out. Can't ramble on enough about this one, but we have to move on. This was a very tough decision for me between my number 1 and 2. I had to go with what I thought was the better playing game and the game that resonated with me more on an emotional level. I know that sounds corny, but you're going to see where I'm going with this. And after many hours of deliberating in my own head, I've come down to these two, and my number 2 favorite PlayStation 4 game of all time is Bloodborne. Yes, this was the game that made me get a PlayStation 4. This was the first game coming out in April 2015 that originally made me run out and buy a PlayStation 4 after a year and a half of it already being released and there not being a ton of exclusives that I wanted. When I saw this game, I needed to have it. What is Bloodborne? Well, if you don't know, you should. It's basically the the Dark Souls formula, originally started in Demon Souls by From Software, put into a Gothic Victorian kind of horror setting. It starts as kind of, werewolves and a very Eastern European feel, and kind of later leans more into like a Lovecraftian cosmic horror vibe. And this game it got under my skin. It got into my blood. This game is difficult, yes. The combat, while initially seeming not that deep, is incredibly deep and satisfying after a few hours of playing. I needed to keep playing this game. I thought about playing this game when I wasn't. When I was at work, when I was out, I'm like, man, I want to go home and play Bloodborne. I needed to unlock everything. I needed to find the secrets. I needed to find the secret bosses. The style of this game was just intoxicating. Somewhere between RPG and horror game. It was like that perfect mix that for me, I love that Gothic look. I love that aesthetic. I love the music. I love the enemy variety. Amazing enemy designs and variety in this. That's a huge factor for me. Like some of the creatures that you fight are just pulled out of somewhere between Victorian Gothic horror and then some from, like I said, cosmic horror, tentacles. It's like werewolves and squid monsters everywhere. So good, so cluttered with secrets and unlockables. Like there's whole areas of this game that you can overlook. I went through this game 4 times. This was my first PlayStation 4 Platinum game. I needed to have everything. And then the DLC came out later in the year, The Old Hunters, and that was one of the best DLC expansions I have ever played. Some of the most memorable boss fights and environments in that area. This was the single player game, I should say, that I probably put the most amount of time into just myself wandering around. I needed to see everything. This is my favorite From Software game. I hope that one day we get a sequel, but if we don't, it doesn't matter, because this is one of the few games I would give a perfect 10 to. I have no problems with this game. Yeah, originally it had long load times, but somehow they upgraded that, patched it out, and put shorter load times with hints in it. Like, I find no flaws in this game. It is one of the 5 games I would say is just about perfect. And that is why it is my number 2 favorite PlayStation 4 game. My favorite PlayStation 4 game is very esoteric. It is specifically for me. And I know many of you at home may sigh and, put your head down when you see this, but for those other fans, you know what I'm talking about. And that is this, my number 1 favorite PlayStation 4 game, and that is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yes, don't tune out just yet if you're not happy with this. Do I think this game plays better than Bloodborne? No, not necessarily. Do I think it's the best game ever visually or gameplay-wise, especially ahead of these other titles? No, not necessarily. But what this is the game that when I saw the title screen, before that, when I saw the new game or continue screen, that Sword in the Darkness that Final Fantasy VII is so famous for its opening screen, I smiled with a tear coming out of my eye. The way this game made me feel as I played it, no other title maybe ever has made me feel. Like I said, when I finally installed the game and I got to the title menu, I started laughing as tears came out of my eyes. I'm not ashamed to say that. No other game has made me laugh and cry at the same time as much as this game. There was the shock and all that. Yes, it was real. After so many rumors for so many years, after 5 years since its initial announcement, the game was finally in my hands. I was playing it. Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games of all time, like for many people. That was my Ocarina of Time. That was the game that just moved me. Like those little Lego people in the PlayStation 1, if I play that to this day, somehow the creators put so much love, care, and heart into those characters can still really, really hit me. And to see it more fully realized in this remake, I was, of course, worried. Could they do it? And I think the heart of that game really transferred over. Now, the elephant in the room is, of course, this is just part 1 of a game. Someone will say it's not a full game. It's a full game. It's just not the full story. I put 40 hours into the story of this game and 100 hours into it to platinum it. That's a full game. Is the story done? No. And I see now what they were doing. Originally, I was mad that it was going to be episodic. But right now, we're in this nebulous period of waiting to see what part 2 and beyond will be. I kind of love it. We're in it. This is a very fleeting moment where we're hoping for more Final Fantasy VII, wondering how it's going to be. I love this feeling. And with it being episodic, it is the only time with episodic releases that I feel what they wanted us to feel, to be living in Final Fantasy VII. Everyone's talking about it. Everybody's wondering it. Whether you loved or hated this remake, it's on most people's tongues. And we're just living a Final Fantasy VII time. But about the game itself, I was mad that it wasn't turn-based at first, that it was real-time. But you know what? It ended up being very similar to a game I love, which is Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, like the evolution of that game. And after a while, it really clicked with me. It's fast, it's frantic, but it's still very tactical. You have to think ahead. You can't just mash the square button to attack. Ended up loving. The visuals. This game portrays the world of Final Fantasy VII, Midgar in particular, in a way that was only in my head before. There's a moment I will never forget in gaming where in the 3rd chapter of this game, after you get off the train and you go to the slums of Midgar, when you step off the train, I'm sorry if I get teary-eyed while I talk about this. When I stepped off the train and just looked up and saw the Midgar plate, I stopped. I froze. For 10 minutes, I just was in awe at the city, at the plate. That's what I saw in my head as a kid. Even Advent Children, the CG movie for Final Fantasy VII, didn't capture it in that way. I walked to the hotel that Cloud stays in, and I stood on the balcony and just looked out over the city. I'm like, that's Midgar. For the last 20 some odd years, that's what it's in my head, and it's now on the screen. The characters were portrayed in a way that I loved. I loved the voice acting. I loved the animations, and I cannot wait for the expansion with Yuffie, who was never one of my favorite characters, but to get to play that game, this game, on the PlayStation 5 with enhanced visuals, faster loading times, and a bit more story, I'm over the moon. I'll take more. Yes, changes were made, but you know what? Those changes to me are exciting, and you know what? You could say that this game could be for newcomers to Final Fantasy VII. If you've never played it, of course you can play the remake. But really, in the pit of my heart, I know this. People have beaten this. I've known this. This is for fans of the old one. What they've put in here, how the story is going, this is if you've already played the original. And I fully encourage that you do. But if you don't want to play an old game, play this. You'll still enjoy it. But for those who have finished it, know what I'm saying. This game was almost exclusively made for fans of the original. It was for me. Yes, it's an esoteric pick. It's purely an emotional pick. But this is still a great game. Visuals, music. Oh, bet my favorite music on the entire generation of consoles is right here in this game. And that is why it's my number 1 favorite PlayStation 4 game of all time, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Can't wait for part 2. I don't care how long it takes. Square, take your time, make it the best you can, and I'll be there when it's released. And that kind of does it. That wraps up my top 10 favorite PlayStation 4 games of all time. Now, I'll do some honorable mentions because I'm sure some of you are screaming at your monitors, why didn't you pick this? Why didn't you pick that? Please leave your comments and know that this is just my nebulous personal picks, that I don't think these games are necessarily better than any others. These are just the ones that I like the most. But there were some that I had to cut out of the top 10 that I was really sad about. So let's go over them real quick, and I'll say why I cut them, why I like them, why I cut them out in short order. Number 1 on that list is Horizon Zero Dawn. Love this game. It's fantastic. The reason I left it out of the list is I can barely remember any of the side characters in this other than Aloy herself. Like, none of the other characters really resonated with me. I didn't care about the side mission. The actual playing of this game, though, is phenomenal. This game, the acts of hunting robot animals and dinosaurs, is beyond anything else. I loved it. I think the combat was stellar when it came to that. Just the window dressing around that wasn't as good. I love the world and I love the combat, but the story and characters, didn't really care for it. But I'm super excited for Horizon 2. And moving on to another game, we are looking at Final Fantasy 15. I love this game to death. I know that's somewhat controversial. Every Final Fantasy these days is somewhat controversial, but I thought this game was fantastic. I have 2 gripes with it though. Number 1, I don't care if you played it without seeing it. You really need to see the movie Kingsglaive that only came with this deluxe edition to fully understand the story of Final Fantasy 15. I think that kind of hurts it. That always annoyed me. I had seen it, so I considered myself lucky. But a big part of the preamble of this story is in a separate CG movie. And number 2, if I was to play this game today, it'd be an almost entirely different game. I played this game at launch and really loved it, but the amount of patches, upgrades, and DLCs that have come out have really transformed it. So I can't say that the game that I play really exists anymore. I intend to fully replay through this game on my PS5 with the quicker loading and check out all those expansion and changes. But those 2 things kept it off the top 10 list. I still love this game, put 100 hours to it. One of my first platinums on the PS4. Do suggest that you check it out. That's Final Fantasy 15. Sticking with Square is Kingdom Hearts 3. I love this game. Yet again, another controversial pick, but I thought it was beautiful. I thought the combat was fun. I think it was a pretty good conclusion to the trilogy, or it's not a trilogy. Kingdom Hearts 3 is not the 3rd Kingdom Hearts game. Everyone knows that. It's like the 12th, and I love all of them, but the reason I left this off the list is because I don't think it was as good as Kingdom Hearts 2. It was shorter, it was a little easier, but still, great game, worth checking out. I don't think the worlds were as good as in Kingdom Hearts 2, so that's the number 1 reason that I left it out, but still a great game, Kingdom Hearts 3. Moving on to a huge Sony exclusive that I love to death, that's Ghost of Tsushima. I don't really have anything bad to say about this game. I platinumed this game. I loved this game. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the combat was fun. I thought the characters were great. I want to see more games made with this amount of love and care. However, it was between this and SpiderMan PS4, and I had to say to myself, as much as I love riding my horse, Kage is what I named him in mine, throughout the beautiful lands of Tsushima and seeing those brilliant particle effects, I didn't like it more than swinging around the city as Spider-Man, and that's the only reason I left it off this list. I have nothing bad to say about this game. If you haven't played it, it lives up to the hype. Great PS4 exclusive, Ghost of Tsushima. And the last game I will mention is Devil May Cry 5. Yes, everyone knows, if you've seen my prior videos, I love Capcom. They're some of my favorite games. They are my favorite game maker of all time, making some of my favorite games of all time. And Devil May Cry is one of my favorite franchises ever. And I think 5 was an incredible return to form. I like DMC. Don't string me up for that. I did like DMC, the Ninja Theory game, but I think DMC went into the better direction with going back to the original series with 5. I thought the combat was fantastic. I love the return of classic Dante, Nero, and even V was pretty cool. The reason I left it off the list, though, is playing as V with his summons can kind of grind my gears on harder difficulties. I don't have a ton of fun playing as V. I think that was kind of not good. After so many hours of playing, it's initially fun, but I just wanted to play as Dante and Nero and not have to S rank or triple S rank everything with V anymore. Number 2, the RE engine, which Capcom has been using for their big releases, including Resident Evil, is a fantastic engine that's wonderful for rendering real environments and real faces, but I don't think it did a huge amount of service to Devil May Cry 5. While I think Dante and Nero and V look fantastic with the motion captured faces, I think some of the other characters look a little funny, and the world is a little not as idiosyncratic as other Devil May Cry worlds. It didn't stick out to me. There's a lot of like dark city areas, and the Quailoth like tree, whatever you call it, is just kind of bland gray and dark looking. The environments really didn't stick out to me. So that was one of the reasons. Like I can remember, even though it was pretty gloomy, every single part of Tem and Negru from Devil May Cry 3 and a lot of the areas from Devil May Cry 4 just really had a lot of color and popped. The backgrounds don't pop to this in me. And number 3, and this is particular to the PlayStation 4 version of the game, were the load times. The load times in this game actually kept me away from replaying it sometimes, like because going into the menus, going into the shop, going back into a level, like you always had to load and it was always annoying. And I'm glad to say after playing the special edition of this game on PS5, that is no longer an issue, but those other issues still stand. I still think this is like a 9.8 out of 10 if I had to give it a number, but I had to keep it off the list for those reasons that I said. Still love it. Devil May Cry 5, and that wraps it up. So at the end, those are actually 15 of my favorite PS4 games. I kind of cheated there. But yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake ended up being my favorite, and I had a lot of fun doing this list, and I can't wait to hear what you guys comment about this. I will be doing more top 10s in the future, so please look for that. We're going to be doing more rare games and toy reviews very soon, so if you've liked hearing me talk today, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you want to see next. My name is Mike. This has been Chip Damage, and thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves.